Welcome back. It's the Marketer of the Day podcast, and Mr. Coach Dan Gordon is here. Now, in 2016, Dan made a mistake that destroyed his marketing company and cost him over $80,000. He's laughing now because it's fun to look back and laugh at the misfortunes. It's scary in the moment, but it's fun later. And Dan chose a bold new direction. And 8 months later, he walked on stage being paid $10,000 for his first professional speaking gig. And Coach Dan takes entrepreneurs on a journey of bold transformation, which means they expand their income, they become powerful leaders, and they enjoy life to the fullest. So if that sounds like you, if you want to get on that path and you want to experience living life unlimited, then you're going to want to sit up, close the door, put the baby away, get the pad and paper and all that stuff, and listen to what Coach Dan Gordon has to say. So, Dan, glad to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's such a wonderful introduction. It's almost like, I don't know, like I wrote it myself.
Right, just about, but that's just the right amount of ad-libbing, and that's what we do, right? We kind of take the template and the procedure and the proven
Yeah.
process. That way, we don't have to start from scratch, but we also improvise, and that way we get that blend every day of the certainty along with the variety and the adventure and the risk, but also you are not starting over every single day. So, I mean, tell me about yourself. We introduced you a little bit, but then as far as your own like self-bio, your own elevator pitch, what makes you unique? What makes you passionate?
Well, instead of talking about myself, I'd much rather talk about your audience and give them some value. I
Okay.
listen to a lot of podcasts, as I'm sure you do too. And the podcast I don't like is where people spend a tremendous amount of time talking about themselves. And here's the fact, and this is true for you who are listening right now. Nobody cares about you. They care about themselves. Everybody's asking the question, what's in it for me? So I'm going to jump right into what's in it for you. Does that sound okay?
Yes, that sounds wonderful.
Okay. So I focus on sales, and I don't focus on sales just for the money, which I know sounds odd, but I focus on sales because that's where the action's at. Anything that you struggle with in life, in business, in relationships, it shows up in a sales interaction, right? And so the other side of that is in order to properly message your company, message what you do, you have to test those messages. People are relying on ChatGPT and social media and video, and that's all great. I mean, I use all those tools, but until you can capture someone's attention with talking about what you do, then you don't really have a message. All you have is an explanation. And everybody has an explanation of what they do, but your message has to grab people's attention. And that's what I love about sales. Because when you're talking with someone one on one, you can see in their eyes whether what you're saying is resonating with them or not. Make sense?
It does. I mean, and you're speaking about marketing 101 here about how people care
Right.
about themselves, what's in it for me, meeting them
Mm,
with their at, and you can be stuck in a vacuum, as you say, with the chat GPT all day long. But until you go out there and you test your message and you send traffic, and
yeah.
even like what you're doing here is you're taking your show on the road and kind of testing out your material like a comedian. And even the kids these days when they post on the social media, sometimes you get engagement and sometimes you don't. And then when something works, you do more of that. And it makes
Mm,
total sense the way that you speak about it from this high level. But where are people struggling to implement? It's easy enough to say, like, test your message, but then how
yeah.
do we make that a reality?
So that's a great question. And there's a couple different answers to it. The first place that people are really struggling is we have separated ourselves out quite a bit, right? We have a lot of ways to not interact with each other. And, ghosting has become such a strangely acceptable way of handling a difficult situation, right? Instead of talking with someone, you just sort of evaporate. Right? So, and I get it. Like all of those things, and I say this a lot. Um, the most difficult conversations are the only ones that you want to have, right? If someone's unhappy with your service, you want to find out more about it. And so that's what makes sales so powerful is that as you're talking to someone about what you do, and you can see directly whether or not your message is making an impact, you're going to have an emotional reaction about, wow, this person really doesn't care about what I'm saying. And while that might not feel good, the learning in it is so important. So let me give you a couple like um, direct ways, right, of doing this, right? So we're not just talking in the abstract.
Perfect.
All right. So when you're talking about someone, when you're talking to someone about what you do, the really the first thing that you want to do is learn about them, right? Because people will come up to you like in a networking, environment, or just you meet someone, someone says, "What do you do?" Now, when someone says, "What do you do?" and this is true in sales and everything, you have to listen to what someone is saying beneath their words. Beneath their words. When someone says, "What do you do?" they're not really saying, "What do you do?" What they're saying is, "I hope the answer to this question is something that's interesting to me." Now, the most interesting thing to anybody is what? Right?
Themselves.
Themselves, right? That's why you want to turn that conversation around as quickly as possible. So someone says, "What do you do?" I say, "I'm a professional troublemaker," right? It gets them to laugh. And while they're laughing, I'm like, "Tell me about you." Right? Or I'll say, I'm tired of talking about myself. Tell me about you." And that is key. It is key to get someone talking about themselves because then they become engaged. And while they're talking about themselves, you can listen to what they're saying and see how your product or service fits into what they're doing or what they're struggling with. So it's great to learn about someone else. The other thing is, while they're talking, you want to nod and lean in and make comments about what they're saying that reflects back to them, not reflects back to you. Now, this is all groundwork for when it's time for you to talk about you and what you do, right? Because after that person has like exhausted themselves, then they'll turn to you and say, "Well, tell me a little bit about you." And then what you want to do, the first thing you want to do is you want to reference something that they said. Hey, when you were talking about teaching your daughter how to drive, it really made me think about X, Y, and Z. Right? And then you lead that right back into whatever it is that you do. Right? So what you're doing is you're acknowledging that you heard what they said instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. Right? Again, makes sense?
It does, yes.
Okay. So now as you begin to unfold what you do, instead of just talking about it in broad terms or even specific terms, you talk about it in terms of the solution. All right. So let me give a concrete example. When I'm talking to someone about coaching, I say, "Hey, wouldn't it be great to walk into a sales meeting and just feel like I got this?" Right? Not be nervous, not wonder how you're going to respond to all of their rejections or their, all their questions, or if you're saying the right thing, but just to walk in and always think, "Yeah, I got this." Like, oh, that's such a good feeling. Right?
It
I'm
is.
not describing any part of how I do it. What I'm describing is a feeling that people want. Right? And that is key, because anything that you're selling, be it a product or service, you're not selling a thing. What you're selling is an experience. You're selling like, for instance, when someone goes to Disneyland, no one wants to go to Disneyland. What they want to have is they want to have an experience that they love and that they want to remember for the rest of their lives. Right? That's what Disneyland is selling. So your product or service has to be positioned as the thing that not just solves a problem, but really makes them feel good and and at ease. And if you don't know what that is, that's the work that you need to do.
And so, am I alone in that it sometimes like hurts my brain thinking about this stuff? Like it's like it's like the more you think about it, like the less sense it makes, and I have to kind of just like keep my brain working. It's like when you try to analyze like dating or a comedy or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like there's literally the words you're saying, and then like another
Hmm.
layer of that is kind of like the information. But then like a few levels removed, then is when you're tapping into some of these things that you're mentioning of like
Mm.
tapping into the emotions instead of the logic and letting them kind of give you all the input as if you're the chat GPT, right? Like when you use chat GPT, all this information and you say,
Yeah.
just give me this little bit out of it. So it's like your prospect or the person you're speaking to, they're giving you all this. And as you said, like they're kind of wearing themselves out a little bit. And you're just kind of like listening and just kind of like saying, well, how do some of these building blocks, like a lot of it is, it's not that it doesn't matter, but a lot of it like doesn't apply. But you say, well, can some
Mhm.
building blocks then play later on? And as you said, there's kind of that aspect of, well, can I show them that I'm alive and I'm active and I'm paying
Yeah.
attention? And then it makes my brain go back to the whole like dating idea. And so when you like teach people this and coach people this, do they
Mhm.
have like similar feedback of this of like, I feel like it's with the way you describe this process, it's like it's some of these things that me and my wife do, like some of these sales calls, and we sometimes do some of these steps here, but and then it
Yeah.
kind of like makes it make sense. But then I also feel like the more I zone in on it and I kind of
Mhm.
analyze what you're saying, then I feel like it makes less sense. Makes
Mm.
that kind of
Yeah, but
weird?
no. I hear what you're saying, because when you start to try to deconstruct all these things, they seem to get really complicated.
Yeah,
Do I have that right?
you do.
Okay. So really what I want you to do, and what I want you who are listening to do, is take a giant step backwards and think, what is what's the experience, the emotional experience that I'm delivering? Right? Like if I was selling fishing lures, I'm not selling fishing lures. What I'm selling is that emotional experience when you hook that fish and you pull it out of the water, it's this giant bass, and you're like, whoa, this is awesome. I can't wait to show my friends. That's right. The fishing lure is the delivery device to that feeling, right? So if you start with the feeling that you're delivering, the experience that you're delivering, and then you simply work backwards to your product and how they match up. Is that an easier explanation?
It is because I find myself sometimes I if I see like a web page or like I meet on Zoom one-on-one and I end up
Yeah.
buying something or I have a good feeling or when I after I buy it during the onboarding process when I'm like something's right here and then I kind of
Mhm.
take mental notes of like okay, how do I up my own game and in my own
Mm.
sales and my own delivery, how do I kind of rise to kind of that level? And I think you're on the right track of me trying to file this away in the right part of my brain is saying, okay, like what's that when I have that feeling of this person really has this dialed in. They know what they're talking about. Or man, this person they know exactly how to meet my needs. It's like that's what I need to be looking to replicate. Like if the feeling I feel, I want them to
Yeah.
feel it, and then I can kind of reverse engineer and then the implementation and the steps and the logic is just to get to that emotional state.
Yeah. And, Robert, you have, and you struggle with what a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. And that is we love to analyze.
Overanalyze.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's overanalyzed, but it is analytical, right? Because as an entrepreneur, our brains have to be fired up. And I'll tell you something, I really suffered with um, putting myself in stressful situations because I start to, process through all the potential outcomes. And what I found is that it's like grinding metal. Right. And so I started looking for ways to like ease my stress. And for most entrepreneurs, that's something that most people struggle with. Because when you're walking into a sales situation, your stress is spiked. And there's nothing I can just tell you to do or say that can turn that off, because that's an internal experience. And so there's some basic things that entrepreneurs struggle with, and that is stress, it's sleep, and it's focus. And I started looking around for ways to improve, to get more sleep, because if you're not getting sleep, you're operating at half capacity. If you're stressed, same thing. And if you're not focused, and that's a problem that a lot of entrepreneurs have, like we just want to look at everything.
Yeah.
And so I I tried meditating. I suck at meditating. I tried, different pills or different supplements, nothing worked. I found this thing that blew me away. It's called New Calm. And it's this technology that's called binaural beats. It's this thing that alters how your brain responds that's delivered underneath music. Now, I did not believe this was going to work. I mean, it sounded way too, airy fairy, but I started using this and immediately I started getting more sleep. Immediately I was feeling less stressed and I'm a lot more focused. And this is foundational to what entrepreneurs need. And so I did some research on this company. Turns out it's the only company that was given a FDA rating of a medical device, a class 3 medical device, like a pacemaker. And it's really just listening. So I've become such a fan that I am encouraging people to try it. And so if you want to try this thing, it's free. Just text the word calm, CALM, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366 and text the word calm, CALM, to 213-409-8366. Just try it. Like the military is using it, special forces is using it. Um, for professional sports, the NFL, the NHL, like some pretty heavy, some pretty heavy, stressful thing. And so it really is a game changer. And I'm all of my clients are using it now, and the reason I'm encouraging it and really talking about it is because instead of just looking for like a quick fix or how do I reach my audience, how do I sell better, when you're a better entrepreneur, when you're in a better state of mind, everything works better. It's like if your car has a flat tire, it doesn't matter what kind of engine it is, what kind of system it has, you are operating at partial capacity. So it's my biggest pitch to help yourself. And I'll just give it one more time. Text CALM, CALM, to 213-409-8366.
And that's great. And you're getting to the root cause of things, right?
Yeah.
And you hear this a lot, and it's easy advice to ignore of take care of yourself and take care of your
Mm.
sleep. And you mentioned that I recently started waking up like 4 or 5 in the morning just because that's the quiet hours. I have a kid that's time before school. And then maybe like a month or two ago, I had this podcast guest who was telling me that he sometimes naps in the middle of the day. And I just kind
Mm.
of got up from a nap. You can see my hair's a little messed up. It's because this, grown man said it's totally okay. Just lay down for like 20, 30 minutes just to reset yourself when you need to focus, get over the bad mood. And so I'm
Mm.
100% with you on that. And it helps just to have the focus and to have I don't know if resolve's the right word, but like something I struggle with sometimes, Dan, is just showing up to meetings, right? Like this meeting we have, it's
Mm.
like it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon for both of us. And
Yeah.
in the afternoon, it's easy to say, I've had a whole day. I can just skip this last meeting. But just that whole idea of like sticking to your commitments. It's sometimes
Yeah.
hard to do because us entrepreneurs tell ourselves the story of like, I'm a wild card, I'm a rebel, I go and do all these things. Sometimes just showing up to your appointments helps so much. So in these last few minutes here, can you give us any kind of like lasting advice? I know that you've had your like ups and downs in life, and we all have, and we've all lived these multiple lives and all this trauma. So what advice do you have as far as some of this success that you're talking about, and how do we just like commit to what we do and follow through and get there?
Yeah. That's a great question. You know, I talk about this a lot in with my clients and groups from the stage. It's all about discomfort. And when you want to do the things you don't want to do, because inside of everything that you don't want to do is learning and growth and success. And so there's a there's a uh, an exercise that I give to a lot of people, and I'm going to share it with you and your audience. Next time you're in a restaurant and you have a meal, at the end of the meal, when the waiter comes up and says, "Can I get you anything else?" Say yes. And I want you to say this almost verbatim. Say, "I have a big request." And I want you to know it's okay if the answer is no. I'm not committed to you saying yes, but here is the request. I would like a dessert and I would like the restaurant to pay for it. I'd like a dessert and I'd like the restaurant to pay for it. Are you open to that? Okay. That's it. The reason that's so powerful is because it plays into a lot of our fears, a lot of our beliefs, a lot of our the ways that we hold ourselves back from asking for what we want. It's such a beautiful exercise because it pinpoints all of these societal norms and the rules that we live under that keep us playing small. Now, I had a client do this recently, and she said that when she got her dessert, she panicked because she felt unworthy of it. And she felt really unsure what to, like she wanted to pay for it so bad because she just didn't know how to accept this. And that's what the exercise is about. You know, all of the luminaries, Gandhi, Dr. King, Mother Teresa, Richard Branson, these are people, and the reason they were successful is because they were willing to make big asks. And they were okay with hearing no, but they were relentless in their ask. And so that is my push. You must be relentless in your ask. It's not about not taking no for an answer. It's about being so enthusiastic and so determined and so disconnected to people's response that you're filled with the enthusiasm of the ask.
That's beautiful. And what comes to mind is there's all this data about like when people win the lottery, their life just falls apart, right? They end up
Yeah.
broker in debt, sometimes murdered, all the family relations destroyed just because they hadn't done the mental work and they were
Yeah.
unprepared for the success that happens is all the things that you process. Like even you talking about the asking for the free dessert, I was kind of feeling a little scared just even just thinking
Right.
about it. I'm not even doing it in this very moment. And so that's something to really think about as far as the pursuing those goals and getting the focus, because a lot of people don't think about focus in terms of like ignoring all these things that aren't helping me. And there is a lot of bad stuff out there, right? And there is a lot of rejection, a lot of things that
Hmm.
could make you feel bad if you chose to focus on that. But why
Yeah.
focus on all the negative and the don'ts? Get laser focused on being weird and being outrageous and getting these goals and getting to this sort of success. And so speaking of success, your coach Dan Gordon, and as far as the people that you've coached and kind of the results that you feel like talking about, are there any kind
Yeah.
of wins that you can share with us about other people you've helped?
Yeah. Sure. You know, one of the things, and if you're thinking about coaching, it, the most important thing that you have to ask a business coach before you ask anything else is how do you plan to get me paid back for what I'm paying you? How do you plan to get me paid back for what I'm paying you? And if your coach doesn't have an answer to that, or if they say, well, what you put into it is what you get out of it, which is just another way of saying, I don't have a plan, run. Don't walk, run. Because if you're hiring a business coach, and that's not like a life coach or different kind of coach, but a business coach has to have a plan for getting you paid back. So the reason I'm saying that is that the answer to your question is I always get my clients paid back for what they're paying me. I always increase their income. And it's through these methods that we've been talking about. It's through encouraging them to step into the things that they fear, doing these kind of exercises, teaching them how to sell better, how to talk to people, how to connect with people. So the people don't feel like they're being sold. They just feel like they're making a connection. And also having the courage to double what they're charging. And for every client, I have at least gotten them paid back for what they pay me. And I'm expensive. But for most times, they're making a lot more because I take them through this process, because we go into the things that they're afraid of, and through them, they are set free and they live a life that I can only call unlimited.
That seems lovely, and that's what we all want. And there's all these
Yes.
sayings, right? All these cliches about what your dreams are on the other side of fear, that you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and all these other things. And it's one thing to hear about it, learn about it, and think about it. But if someone needs that extra bit of help, if they say this guy Dan Gordon, he's the answer to my dreams and my prayers, what's the next step? How does someone find you, and how do they take action with you?
Yeah. So a really easy way would be to ask for help. And what I mean by that is text the word help to that same number I mentioned before. Text help, HELP, to 213 409 8366. 213 409 8366 and text the word help. And you will book a 15-minute call with me. I guarantee you at the end of the call, you will not be a client because this call is not about selling you something. This call is about helping you. Very few people take me up on this because most are too afraid to look at the things that they struggle with. So if you listening right now have the courage to look at the things that you struggle with to be set free, text help to 213 409 8366. And that's it. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can find me in a bunch of different places. You just do a Google search for Coach Dan Gordon. I'll show up. But if you really want to change your life, like if you're committed, then you're not someone who says, well, let me collect a little bit of information. You take action. I only work with badass entrepreneurs. So you got to be badass and show up.
And I saw that was part of your branding, the badass entrepreneur. We've
It
all
is.
had those moments in life, haven't we, Dan, where we finally go, and so sometimes we don't even know why it happens. We go from being passive and casual and like, well, I'm in that middle ground, and the problem isn't really that bad, but it's also not really that good. And sometimes
Yeah.
we're listening to a podcast such as this one, and we say, you know what? Finally, this is finally the time something snapped within me. I'm gonna go and grab my phone right now. I'm gonna text the number right now so that way I can take the next step and schedule that call with Dana and finally change things and finally just look back someday and say, man, why did I take all those years to finally make the decision? Well, today's the day that you did because you texted that number. Can we get it one final time before wrapping up, Dan?
Sure. Yeah. Text help, HELP, to 213 409 8366. 213 409 8366. Text help and also text calm, CALM, to get a free trial of Newcom, my secret weapon. And I'll leave your audience with this one last thought. Most people only live at the level of misery they can endure. Few people step up to do the hard work, the scary work that sets them free. And if you want to be one of those people, it means taking action now. That's it.
I love it. Very simple, very powerful. And thank you for these words of advice, Dan.
Absolutely, man. It has been a delight being on your show. Thank you for the invitation.